Well, first things first, and that means the Max Verstappen Lando Norris incident in the closing laps at turn 12 at Kota, a circuit that's really good for racing. I said yesterday it wasn't the circuit, my favourite circuit in terms of demanding technical corners, but in terms of racing, very, very good. And we saw that at turn 12. Lando has the DRS. He can't get past Max, who's really good under braking, very good in defence, has been for the last 5 or 6 laps. But he goes around the outside at 12. And Max does the totally predictable thing, which is use all the road. At which point Lando goes off track outside him. Now, he got a penalty for that. McLaren was saying immediately, oh, you were ahead at the apex and I had you off. Both of them were off the track. I didn't actually see Max Verstappen off track there, so that's the first point. But beyond that, because it very specifically talks about not taking advantage of being off track, passing another car when you're off track, I think McLaren made yet another mistake for Lando, because there was always going to be doubt. There was always going to be argument about that. Lando had the quicker car. His tyres were newer by 6 laps. He still had a couple of laps to go. He was in DRS all the time. They should, regardless of what they thought, instead of getting on the radio and defending him and saying, yeah, it'll be okay, Lando, we're fighting it. They should have just said, Lando, drop back, repass him. That's what they should have done, and Lando would have got him, I'm sure, by the end of the race. I'm absolutely shocked that McLaren didn't do that. And to the point where even Oscar Piastri's engineer was saying to Oscar, oh, they've told Max to speed up because obviously they think he's going to get a penalty. It's just ludicrous stuff. Red Bull didn't think that. Red Bull was saying, speed up, Max, because he's got a 5-second penalty and we want to make sure within the 5 seconds, or he's likely to get it. That's what was going on. It seemed like they weren't even on the same planet. And I feel sorry for Lando Norris, because that's exactly what he said after he crossed the line. He said, oh, well, I guess what I should have done then is just drop behind him, which is pretty obvious. And I'm surprised he wasn't given that instruction. The engineer should have said to him, Lando, it is doubtful, but you can get P3 here. Just drop back for the sake of argument. Let's drop back. And the other point, of course, is if they'd done that, it's possible that Max then would have got a penalty for forcing Lando Norris off track. We don't know what would have happened there, but because it was completely covered by the fact that Lando kept his foot in it, and maybe there was more grip off track at that point, who knows, and got the lead there, and got in front of him there. So again, I think that comes under the heading of, well, I don't agree with any of the rules anyway. I think it's much better to have proper motor racing. And I'm quite pleased that no action was taken by Max's move at the first corner, which was obviously pretty blatant. But at the same time, no different, as I've said a million times, no different from Oscar Piastri's move at the first corner in the Hungarian Grand Prix, when he just came charging down the inside. And to avoid Piastri, Lando had to ease the steering to the left, and then Max had to do the same to avoid Lando. I thought it was a bit odd that Lando said, Max did the same thing in Hungary, but that was Oscar Piastri, I'm afraid, Lando, that was the real guy that should have got the penalty, if they're going to give penalties for first corners. But it looks as if the stewards are thinking, well, first corner, cold tyres, whatever, we'll give them the benefit of the doubt. And there were a couple of things, obviously Max with Carlos Sainz as well on the opening lap. So yeah, they didn't do anything there. So you'd think, well, that's quite good. They're going to let them race. And I think there should have been, well, because it's actually written in the rules, if you take advantage of being off track and you pass another car, that is a penalty situation. Because that is there and everything else is quite grey, it was pretty clear in my mind that's what McLaren should have told Lando to do. But overall, I just wish they'd just let them race. I really do. If they want to have a fight after the race, good for television, as Bernie would say. They're all grown men, kind of. And, we didn't get to see Lando afterwards. The best television after the race would have been the interview with Lando Norris. And we didn't get it because they're so stuck in protocol. They're so stuck in the way they do things that they can never think laterally like that. And it's a great shame. And I should mention here, I've got quite a lot of friends, obviously, in the United States, all of whom are unbelievably irate that the live TV coverage of the US Grand Prix from Austin was cut off before the podium ceremony. And they didn't get interviews, as far as I can understand. I mean, that is, if Formula One is trying to make it big in America, that is a really, really bad thing. And I just, I'm amazed that happened. But I've got a whole list of people here saying, what is going on? Why have they cut out the broadcast? I don't even think there was any other sports events going on. I don't know what was happening. Anyway, that's just by the by. So, yeah, I think it was unfortunate for Lando. And he drove, well, let's talk about it, because he obviously had a better car, much better car than the Red Bull in the race. And yet the McLarens finished 4th and 5th in the end. not very good. And Lando was on the pole as well. By the time he came out of turn 1, he was in 4th place. Let's just talk about that then off the line. Lando they all made pretty good starts. But as I said yesterday, it's a very short run into turn 1. And as I also said yesterday, Charles Leclerc was going to be in the best position to have the grandstand view of what was going on. And what he saw was Max doing what Max was obviously going to do, which is sort of go to the middle of the road and the last minute darts down the inside and then just turns in. Well, not like that. Very Max Verstappen, slightly more gentle. But he has no grip at the front. He runs wide. And Charles is in a perfect position to read this and just goes down the inside. The millisecond that Max starts to drift, Charles just down the inside there, zap, and takes the lead. And what a lead. He just didn't look in his mirrors, disappear. Nothing in front of him, could look after the tyres. I think the big fundamental weirdness of that race was how good the Ferraris were. Well, that wasn't really weird because they showed up pretty well in the sprint race yesterday. And as I said, it's a good car now, pretty much so. When it's in its right sweet spot, it's a very, very good car. And if it ain't broke, don't fix it. And they came to Austin with minimal upgrades, just working on the car, getting the best from the drivers, best from the team. It's a triple header, getting everybody focused on what's ahead. Typical brilliant management, simple, logical, brilliant management by Freddie Vasseur. And you've got great drivers there. And Charles Leclerc was just superb all day. I mean, he looked a little bit erratic on Friday, as he often does, but just wonderful. Once he got the lead, once he got that sniff of the lead, nothing was going to stop him. No mistakes, just perfect use of the tyres, perfect judgment of the race. And I think he got driver of the day actually, which is a surprise because normally they give it to somebody that you think, well, but on this occasion, the winner of the race just deserved it 100% in my opinion, and just drove brilliantly. I thought Carlos Sainz did too. As I've been saying all weekend, I thought he drove really well in the sprint race, and I thought he drove really well, and I felt quite sorry for him because he was all over Max, and really he lost that. I suppose he lost his ability to really take the race to Charles in that early phase when he had some sort of weird fuel thing going on. It's a distraction when you can start smelling something like fuel in the cockpit. And that went on for 4 or 5 laps. Admittedly, when the safety car was out, thanks to Lewis Hamilton going off on the same corner as George Russell, which is the most demanding corner on the lap in many ways, because it's slightly downhill approach as well. Went off in 5th gear. Didn't hit anything though, but it brought out the safety car. Terrible weekend for Lewis Hamilton. Brought out the safety car. And by the time the safety car went in, that fuel smell was abating in the Sainz car, but it does, it's slightly worrying, isn't it? But it did go away, and Carlos just put his head down and came in a little bit early, did the undercut on Max, and was ahead of him thereafter and pulled away. And Max was going reasonably well in his first 5 or 6 laps on the new hard tyres in the second part of the race, but every time he did a lap, Sainz found a couple of tenths. But by then Charles had gone because Carlos's race was compromised a little bit by having to do that undercut. But a fabulous second place. It still makes me think, and I'm going to say it again, even if everybody's sick of hearing it, I cannot believe that Ferrari are sacking this guy at the end of the year. And I keep using that word sacking because that's what it amounts to. They've decided to sack him at the start of the year. And no racing driver ever, and I've been racking my brains to think about it, has ever been put in that position of having to be the full team player, all the support, winning races, getting podium finishes, great seconds, whatever, and knows that he's lost the drive at the end of the year, regardless of what he does. I think it's in a sporting ethic way, it's a really, really tough thing to do that. And absolute 100% total respect for Carlos, the way he's handling it, the smile, the way he works with the team, just absolutely brilliant. And he races Charles hard, as we saw yesterday. And it's a shame he couldn't get a little bit nearer because of that issue. But very, very good second place. And a great one, too, for Ferrari. I mean, what a result for them. So, yeah. And then there was P3, which, McLaren, I said yesterday, McLaren brought a lot of upgrades to Austin. And I kind of implied, maybe they're trying to do a bit too much going into a triple header, and they haven't got the car fully sorted yet. They definitely had a better car today. They could play around with it in Parc Fermé before qualifying. But it's a difficult one because Lando, as I say, on the pole, it's not a huge advantage in Austin. You're on the right-hand side, the clean side of the grid. Okay, you got the grip, you got a little bit of an advantage over the guy next to you, the way they stagger the cars. But you go into that first corner, it's so wide going into turn one, and it's such a short drag up there that there's very little you can do if you've got the entire pack behind you and you've got somebody like Max down on your inside. What do? You kind of stay in the middle of the road, but you got to watch whoever's either side of you, because they're going to be right on you because of all the circumstances I just described. And before he knew it, Lando was down to P4. I mean, he had to go off track to avoid Max. As I said, no penalty there. And there was Charles. And then all of a sudden, there's Max Verstappen and Carlos Sainz in front of him, and he's P4. But even given how good the McLaren was and how long a stint Lando was able to run on the medium tyre, they all started on new mediums, and you're talking 6 laps longer than Max, as I say, for example. Even though the McLaren was a better car with more downforce, not brilliantly quick in a straight line, but just so good over the lap, then it was surprising that really McLaren didn't do better. Oscar said on his slowdown lap, obviously not quick enough. I actually thought in the live stream building up to this race that Oscar might win here in Austin, but he didn't look as good as Lando at any point of the race in terms of pace and consistent pace over the lap. And Lando arguably could have done a better job maybe of passing Max in the closing stages on those newer tyres. But Max was just a case study of defence. We don't often see Max defending like that, absolutely totally clean. Let's put that the turn 12 incident to one side, but totally clean, just using all the road. There was, he was just position perfect, and Lando was catching him 3-4 tenths a lap. And I guess for most of us on the planet Earth, you'd think, wow, this is pretty daunting, isn't it? He's going to get me for sure, DRS. But not a bit of it with Max. He was just always perfect in everything he did. The timing of his move at the end of the straight, for example, and whenever Lando got a really good run coming out of 12, Max would just ease him a little bit to the left, and then Lando would try around the outside, and Max would just make sure he's in exactly the right piece of road. It was a really nice piece of driving. And so Lando, I think, was just waiting to be near enough with DRS, and he was on that lap when the previous lap, actually, worth pointing out, Max had locked up the left front going into 12, which is why I say I'm still shocked that the McLaren management didn't say to Lando, drop back, give him the position and repass him on the next lap DRS. You can do it. Because he would have, because Max's tyres were going off horrendously at the front, graining or whatever, and Lando, I think, would have got him. I'm amazed they didn't do that. P3, he needed P3 there. In terms of the championship, Max finished in front of him both races and won the sprint race and got more points. So, that was a good result for Max Verstappen. But what happened to the Red Bull? Because it looked really good yesterday in free air. And here in the race, it was not on the same planet as the Ferraris, nor the McLarens, given the pace of Lando and how long Lando was able to make those medium tyres last as well. And, they were saying afterwards, well, the car wasn't very good in the second stint. But there was a weird thing which it came on lap 13, when Max was told to hold 6th gear up to turn 19, which is the second last corner where both Mercedes crashed, George yesterday and Lewis today. And I thought, wow, that's a weird thing. And so I started watching the telemetry, and that means going through the long right-hander, which is turn 18, obviously. Maybe there's three apices there, give it 3 different numbers, I don't know. I don't think in turn numbers, I just call it, this, as you know, second last corner, quick corner here, whatever. They normally get 7th, 2/3 of the way through that long right-hander and hold 7th down to 19 and then go down to 5th. Or Lando Norris on his pole lap stays in 6th, as I said yesterday. Really nice piece of driving on that pole lap by Lando. And they told Max to keep it in 6th out of there. And that was a weird thing, because that meant he was hitting about 12,100 revs out of turn 18. And yet, after he put the hard tyres on, the new hard tyres, he was then getting 7th, and he was changing at something like 10.8, like everybody else. And the other thing I noticed was that when he was on the medium tyres and racing hard with Carlos Sainz, he was actually in front of Carlos. He was getting 8th later than Carlos, even though he was in front, by a millisecond or 2. But if you look at the amount of road he was covering, so he was actually, I don't know whether they were down on power at that point and whether they were doing some sort of lift and coast thing or some weird, well, it didn't look like lift and coast because he was running 12.1 in terms of the gap between turn 18 and turn 19. So it was something to do with the engine that definitely came into play when Max was on the medium tyres. And afterwards, as I say, they were all talking in the green room, and Max mentioned that, well, I think the question was put to him, how was it in the second stint? The hard tyre wasn't. Oh, that's right. I think Christian Horner got on the radio and said, tough second stint, Max. And they're talking about how the car wasn't great on the hard tyre. But for me, the big issue was why the Red Bull was not better on the medium tyre, given how good it was in the sprint race, and why the Ferraris basically blew it away. And then we know the McLaren was able to run its tyres for much longer on the medium tyre as well. And maybe there was some sort of engine thing there which Red Bull weren't talking about during the race, which was showing up on the telemetry as described. That weird thing of just holding 6. It must be a horrendous feeling for Max when you want to get 7th 2/3 of the way through that long fast corner, and you've got to hold it in 6th gear all the way down to turn 19. And whereupon he changed back to 5th and didn't do what Lando was doing for the pole lap. So that's what happened there. He wasn't doing anything different on anywhere else on the lap, as far as I could see. But I can only assume there was something going on in terms of what they're having to do with the engine, the power unit, the power pack, whatever, recharging, I've no idea. But there was something going on with the car. So we shouldn't judge the Red Bull RB20 in its latest form with its floor upgrade purely on what happened on the medium tyre stint today in Austin. I think we have to factor in that there was some power unit issue as well, which they got through by the time they got to the pit stop. But having said all of that, there's no doubt that the Red Bull went through its tyres much faster than the McLarens and certainly than the Ferraris. So that's still an issue for Red Bull, even though they've obviously made some progress, as we saw yesterday. But it was not a great race for them. Brilliant drive by Max Verstappen. And Sergio Perez, who finished P7, got passed by George Russell towards the end of the race, I think is a better indication of where that car is. I mean, he was on the hard tyre, George is on the medium, bring that into focus. But the car is better, but it's still not as good as a McLaren or certainly a Ferrari right now. But probably better than a Mercedes, just. Depends who's driving it, of course. So, great 1-2 for Ferrari. Very good P3 for Max Verstappen. A very frustrating P4 for Lando Norris, who started from the pole, dropped down to 4th at the first corner, got effectively up to 3rd, ran a really good first stint, and then lost P3 with that whole steward's decision, which to me is wrong. It's not part of racing, but it is, that whole thing about passing off track is pretty clear. And as I say, to me that reflects more on the McLaren management for not telling Lando to drop back than it does on the incident between Lando and Max. Oscar Piastri, yeah, but just not quick enough. About sort of Red Bull pace, really, you'd think. So it was Lando that made the car look so good. P5. George Russell, very good. Had to start from the pit lane. Would you believe, after he shunted the car yesterday, Mercedes, in having to rebuild the car, basically, were late on putting on the covers over the car in Parc Fermé. I think it's a 2-hour limit, and they didn't do it, and they got the penalty for that. Talk about, Lewis didn't get out of Q1. Then George Russell has to start from the pit lane and drove really well up to P6. And Lewis goes off, second lap, whatever it was, at turn 19, where George had gone off yesterday. Just terrible. Terrible. Sergio Perez, P7. Should have been higher up, really, in that car, in my opinion. Nico Hülkenberg drove really well all weekend. As I say, this is a very good circuit for drivers like Nico and Carlos Sainz. It's a good racing circuit, but it's also a circuit where you can really accentuate the exits of the corners, as Max was doing a lot when he had Lando behind him, and going in and opening up the entries quite a lot, as he would phrase it. And Nico is one of those drivers that does that really well. Liam Lawson, outstanding in the V-Carb car, started on hards and then switched to mediums, did a really good opening stint on hards, very quick on mediums at the end, finished P9, if you like, in front of his colleague, the fellow rookie, in inverted commas, Franco Colapinto in the Williams, both of whom drove really well on similar strategies. And I thought it was a poignant moment when Liam Lawson passed Fernando Alonso relatively early in the race. Don't forget, Fernando called him an idiot yesterday. And let's have a look where it was. Liam Lawson, P9, Fernando Alonso, P13, please advise. Obviously Fernando got the best from that car. Not a good day for Aston Martin. But I think, given his elder statesman status. Fernando shouldn't go around calling guys like Liam Lawson an idiot. He may not have done anything particularly clever at that specific moment, but that's not particularly respectful, I think. Kevin Magnussen 11th in the other Haas Ferrari, so another good day for them. Pierre Gasly, very good in the early laps, right up there, justifying his grid position, but you know, he is in an Alpine bench. He finished 12th. Fernando 13th, Yuki Tsunoda, a bit messy, didn't really look like Liam Lawson all weekend, really, did he? And I should just clear up one thing I said yesterday. I said Liam effectively gave away his Q2 yesterday because he'd run out of tyres. That's what I assumed was the case, and I really apologise for that. It wasn't the case. It was because they were going to have to change the power unit, and he was going to have to start from the back. So that's why they did that. And good management, good planning. I just want to clear that up. Lance Stroll, 15. Was he there all weekend? Yeah, I suppose he was. Says he was. Alex Albon, about the same, really. And then, you know, whatever, the Stake, Saubers, and Lewis right at the end. So, yeah, in America, with the TV broadcast cut off too early, the Ferraris score a 1-2 in the country that, in the nation that Enzo Ferrari always loved. You know, Luigi Chinetti and the whole North American race team deal for Ferrari has always been huge. And this will be massive for them to win in Austin, Texas. And 1-2 and for Ferrari in America. It doesn't get much better than that in any sport, really. I mean, it's just absolutely huge. I suppose the only thing you could say is it would have been absolutely brilliant, would it not, had they gone back to that light blue livery they had in Miami, almost the North American race team colours that they had in 64, 65 when John Surtees was winning world championships and Grand Prix for Ferrari, and they used to paint the cars blue and white in North America. Wouldn't that have been amazing? They had got the old Nart thing on there, but no, they didn't do that. But they still look fabulous. There's lots of red there, just brilliant. And there was one interesting point I thought that, you know, normally with this thing about penalties and stuff, Lando would have, in the old days, would have been on the podium, and then we would have, you know, we would have known about it, and then Max would have got P3. But they did it very quickly, and there's Max driving up to P3, even though Lando crossed the line ahead of him on the road. And full marks to Lando, actually. I thought for the way he spoke and his demeanour after the race, he's an incredibly well-rounded human being, athlete, sportsman, and I thought he accepted that really well. And he did make the point, did he not? You know, so I should have dropped behind him. And he wasn't saying Lando made the mistake in not dropping back behind him. He was basically saying, why didn't you tell me to do that? You know, because they're on the pit wall and they got that clearer mind. They're out there, they're looking at it all. There should be somebody there who can say, you know, do it. And again, this to me comes under the heading of more points lost for Lando Norris. You know, it was well over 20 before we came to this race, and I suppose you can throw in another 5 or 6 points there now. And I just feel bad for him because he's driving so well. Yep, first corner's a bit of a mess, but it often is for the pole sitter at Austin. I don't think we should hold that against him. So there we are. Okay. Thank you for watching. It's been, I'm obviously doing this from Europe, so, you know, late at night, getting it all out. There was a bit of a glitch, production glitch in the long video yesterday. Sorry about that. But that was just a function of really late nights and trying to get everything out as quickly as possible. So I better get on with processing this one as well. A big thanks to you, the viewer. Big thanks also, of course, to Jetcraft, to OEM Exclusive, and to TrackNinja. It's a triple header, so we'll be doing more videos next weekend. Might try and get a live stream in or a chat with Cameron, something like that between now and then. Watch this space and watch WhatsApp channels. Actually, I've got a new channel there on WhatsApp, and it's a great platform. Really like it. So I'm going to be putting a lot of my content, sort of short content, out there, and it's called Motor Racing with Peter Windsor, because I want to do a little bit more than Formula One. Everybody knows that I'm kind of into rallying now, and lots of other stuff as well, all the feeder formula, and probably get into WEC soon too, so watch out. Anyway, thanks for watching this one. Take care. See you soon.